Chat, what is up? It's Tuesday. We are once again becoming a little bit tactical today, and we've got a lot to talk about. Randomly, this weekend was a huge weekend. We talked about Team 40K last weekend. We had about 1,000 players. I think more than that if we account for smaller events as well. All told, participating in Team 40K events over the past weekend. But we also saw at least one super major level event, 200 plus players, plus another major level event, those being the California Cup and the Me Showdown, running, in the case of the California Cup, 8 rounds. So, huge weekend for 40K. We have a ton of top placing lists to talk about that I'm really excited about. We have God Allegiant Chaos Demons in duplicate, I guess, in multitudes, which is amazing. We have some Black Templars hordes, as the thumbnail discusses. We have some creations of Bile. We have some Genestealer cults. So tons of cutting edge Warhammer 40K that we're going to be discussing today. Obviously, before we get into that, a huge shout out to Captain Con. They're sponsoring the live streams for the time being, and I love them for it. Huge shout out to them. You can check them out at CaptainCon.com. One of the best conventions, holistic gaming conventions of the year, in my opinion, happening first weekend of February 2026. That's January 30th through February 1st. And that's going to be in Warwick, Rhode Island. It's amazing. It's super fun. There will be GTs for 40K and Age of Sigmar run by Away Games. So if you've seen my Away Games coverage in the past, obviously we're big friends of Away Games as well. And they always run amazing events. So I don't know. I'm excited for this year's show. I think it's going to be awesome. The other thing that they do as well is that there's huge, not necessarily miniature gaming focused stuff. There's RPGs, there's board games. It's a tabletop gaming sort of all together. So card games, all sorts of different styles of tabletop gaming. If you are not, or people you're coming with are not necessarily 100% miniature gamer people, there is a lot to do still. There's an enormous board game library. They have a huge rotunda, basically, that is entirely board game focused. So they just have dozens of tables out for people to go and collectively play board games together, which is super fun. They have D&D and other role-playing game, one-shots that you can chop into. There's just a million things to do, in addition to 500 or 600 players that are all there for playing miniature gaming tournaments, specifically. Fucking super cool. Go check them out and get 10% off your badge. Coupon code TT2026 at checkout. So that, chat, is our intro. Let's talk about this, and I want to talk about the California Cup real quick. Look at this event, this glorious event run by our friends over at Green Banner Event Company. 266 players, in my opinion. Came out of nowhere a little bit, but I guess I wasn't up to date on the California the scene, but 266 players is amazing, and it ran the full 8 rounds, got to a single undefeated. Shout out to Michael Mann. I talked about him and his list in my video yesterday morning. So if you want more information on the Space Wolves list that he played to an undefeated record, you can go check that out. He's from Team Art of War. We streamed him on the live stream before. It's absolute sweetheart. So could not have been won by a better dude. But we also saw some crazy other results from the X and ones. First of all, here's an interesting thing. Some of the front runners, so Tau, which was really dominant recently, but I think people have maybe worked their way around it. I don't know if this event used the stealth suit update. I guess we could look. I imagine that they didn't, because I think that was a little bit late. No, it was old stealth suits. So Tau feels like it's going by the wayside a little bit. We're definitely not seeing the same level of representation we've had from them in the past. In addition to that, Adeptus Mechanicus and Eldari, not hugely represented, which I think is really fascinating. I was kind of expecting us to the meta to compress a little bit following World Championships, where everyone's kind of like, okay, well, we can suss out some of the better lists for the top factions in the game. So things like AdMech, things like Eldari. But I guess, part of it, the reason is that those factions are both very difficult to play. They're very mathematically advantageous in a lot of situations, but maybe not as dominant as we had expected. So let's hop in. Heard someone peed themselves at Cali Cup because their opponent wouldn't let them pause their chess clock. Jesus. Interesting. I mean, to be fair, I will play devil's advocate. Most events do not allow chesscock pausing, because what it can do is if you pause the chesscock all the time, then anytime anyone asks a question, suddenly you're just pausing and pausing and pausing. And what it can create is a situation where the judges come to the end of the round, they go, hey guys, where are you at? I see that you have 40 minutes left of your chess clock, and you're like, well, we're in round 3. And they're like, well, the round timer's allotted. I don't know why you both have like 25 minutes left. And they were like, well, we paused for stuff. So, I don't know. If I have to go to the bathroom, I'll either do it on my opponent's turn, like in the movement phase. I'll just be like, I don't have any reactions. I'll go do my thing. Or I'll put it on my time. As long as it's not super far away, it shouldn't it takes you 5 minutes to go in and do your business and take a little hand wash and then run back. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that is oftentimes a hard rule of the event. So I don't know if necessarily it's like the person being a dickhead to their opponent. Yeah. Don't use catheters. Brutal. Brutal. Disgusting. Yucky. Maybe that's where 40K is headed, Once we get more serious on chess clocks, we're going to have to start doing that, right? We're going to start advertising in our BCP postings, and we're going to start using catheters at events so that we can go the full 3 hours and not leave the table at any time. You can constantly watch your opponent. Anyway, let's hop in and talk about some lists. Boom. First of all, we won't bury the lead here. Let's talk about the second place placer from Cali Cup, Celeste Lorch, who was running Black Templars. Now, interesting thing about Cali Cup is that I believe it did have more rounds than it required to get to a single undefeated. I noticed that I think Michael Mann was the only undefeated after round 7. So if you notice, none of the X and ones lost in the finals. So the finals game was, I think, actually against an X and 2 or an X and 1 already. So it became X and 2. So which allowed people to jump them, which is, it is what it is. It is unfortunate you get all the way to the finals and then you get jumped, but unfortunately you do have a loss on your record already at that point. So it is, just win all your games. Easy peasy. But on tiebreakers here, Celeste got second place, 7-1, with an insane Black Templars list. This is a Gladius Task Force. Looks pretty normal. We have Chaplain Grimaldus, going to hop into a big unit. We have High Marshal Halbrecht, gets the +1 strength and attack. Emperor's Champion, Honor Vehement, so we get extra attacks and strength. And then we get, Devastating Wounds, Wound Rerolls, all that stuff. A Judiciar, interesting, with Artificer Armor, so the extra enhanced resilience. Oftentimes it's on the Combi Weapon Lieutenant, but the Judiciar at a baseline, right, does not have an invuln save, so it actually goes a little bit farther on that guy. Or at least he didn't used to. He does now. Oh, he does against melee attacks, excuse me. So he doesn't have range against ranged attacks. So that is actually helpful. And then what's this? It's a Crusader squad. 20 guys. Okay. Oh, there's another one. Huh. That's interesting. Oh. That's another one. That's 60 Crusaders, chat, running up the battlefield. We have double Scout Squads, double Repulsor Executioner, and that's the entire list. That's it. So we have attachments. I guess that can the Judiciar attach to the Crusaders? I assume that he can. I actually don't know. Oh yeah, anything that can attach to an Intercessor Squad. Yeah, okay. So you can attach the Judiciar to a Crusader Squad. So you have a big unit of 20 guys. The Crusaders have a Blood Surge move. They go D6 plus 2 inches in response to shooting attacks that kill one or more models. And so the benefit of the Judiciar in that unit is that you can run them up to the middle of the table. Your opponent shoots them. You Blood Surge into engagement and then fight first and kill them. I guess you fight first anyway. But it prevents you from having or you would fight before that unit anyway, but it prevents you from having the downside of blood surging into melee and then being countercharged, right? Because while you'll fight before the unit that you just engaged, you won't fight before another enemy that charged you. However, the Juicier's like, nah, I will. And then just hits them one more time. The other thing you can do with this, right, is that you can tee this up with squad tactics. So we're playing Gladius Task Force. So these units can run to the middle. You move up to engage with them. They move forward. and then are like, if you blood surge me, I'll engage you. I'm basically moving 2d6 plus 2 inches. It's like better than a charge in your opponent's turn if you shoot them at all. And obviously, if you don't shoot them, if you charge them and it's the Justiciar unit, they'll just hit you. If you don't shoot them or charge them, then they just hold the objective, and so you don't do anything to them. This list is wild. Absolutely insane. And I think there are, if you're not sort of prepared for, it's a little bit of a, it's kind of a side grade, I guess, from like the World Eaters variety, where you're taking like 60 to 80 Khorne Berserkers. The difference being that this version, it does have that reactive move and it is much better shooting. It doesn't hit quite as hard, although it does have Lance, but you don't get the Berserker Warband like detachment ability when you're charging. However, your ability to like manipulate the fight phase, you have Fight on Death and Gladius Task Force as well, is much greater. And so you can do a lot of super weird stuff with this. And if you're not prepared for that style of army, this, I think, is just going to catch you out. You're going to get absolutely bamboozled by just a 120 OC running across the table that you can't really interact with unless you're playing really, really cagey, in which it just wins on scenario. So it's a little bit of a similar situation to like the Spectacle of Spite list we've been seeing, where they can create they can construct a situation where you don't really have a good opportunity to engage with them, right? They will either countercharge you at the end of your movement, or you don't shoot them while they're on objectives. They hold the objective and it's fine. In this case, right, if you don't shoot them, they're gonna hold the objective and just chill. If you do shoot them, they're gonna reactive move, and if you move up to try to deal with them, they're gonna reactive move as well. So there's like a million ways to do weird stuff with this. Chaplain Grimaldus obviously makes his unit much faster, right? +1 to advance and charge. He also can give them +1 toughness, right? Which I guess in some cases, if you're like mass strength 4, can be pretty good. I don't know if that's like quite as exciting. Although +1, if you don't need the advance and charge, +1 AP on melee weapons is also huge. If he's already sort of stuck in melee. So you're like, you got in for a turn, and then you're in Tactical Doctrine, and you fall back, charge back in, and the entire unit is swinging, AP2 chainswords. That gets pretty wild. High Marshal Helbrecht gives everybody +1 strength, +1 attack, and then his mortal wound ability scales with the size of the unit that he's in. So it's naturally on a 2+ you suffer D3 mortal wounds, and on a 4+ you suffer flat 3. On a 6 you suffer D3 +3. However, you get +1 to the roll for every 5 models in his unit. So if you're at 20. If you're full, if you're almost full size, then he's at +4. So on a 2+, he deals D3 +3. And it's also infallible at that point. So you cannot not to do mortal wounds as long as you have 5 people in the unit. And it's basically guaranteed that you'll get at least flat 3 mortal wounds. So he can help you out against like higher strength characteristic stuff. The other thing I think that this army can do, which is probably underrated, is that if you don't, like, I think a lot of times you consider, hey, I'm excited about a mass Crusader squad. We can get up to AP2 chainswords, maybe even AP3 if we're Grimaldus and Assault Doctrine, and we honor the chapter. However, and then we can also get +1 to wound from our Templar vow, right? If we accept any challenge, no matter the odds, then we're largely +1 to wound against basically the entire game. So it's like a mass number of high AP melee attacks that are winning everything on 5s or better. However, this army is, as we talked about, putting 120 OC in the middle of the table. We can also just uphold the honor of the Emperor to give them OBSEC. And then you're in that catch-22 situation where if you move close to them, they'll reactive move to either set up a blood surge or run away. If you don't move close to them, they hold the objective, and then they OBSEC it, and then if you shoot them, they move as well. So you can construct another situation where, like, if they interact with you at all, they get screwed, and if they don't interact with you, you just hold the objective forever. So, the number of, like, weird interactions with these mass Crusader squads inside this Gladius Task Force is fucking crazy, dude. It's super insane. Move block and stop them getting anywhere. Yeah, I mean, you can for sure. You are just giving them like stuff, right? Like, you're like, oh, I'll move block, and they're like, well, now I get to charge something. that can certainly help. And at that point, you're just giving away material because you're not scoring typically if you're doing that, right? If they're solidly on an objective, they're going to have enough OC there. They're going to be able to take it, unless you have like crazy OC. You're like, command squatted, duty and honored, Astra Militarum and your OC4 apiece. So they'll just be taking pieces from you really easily. The other thing too is that they do have the capacity to overwatch pretty well because they have the repulsor executioners. So if you're trying to put in like 5 little idiots, they'll just maybe kill them, right? It's like 5 Eldar Rangers are running in, and you're like, all right, well, I'm about to shoot you like 30 times with with full hit rerolls. So the chance I kill that unit is pretty high before you get to activate. And then the other thing too is that it's actually difficult to fully prevent these units from moving because they're so physically large, right? At that point, they can kind of like bleed over the edges of a screen unless you essentially wrap them, which is very difficult, right? If you have like 10 flying units, you consider something like Taraxi Skystalkers or something where they like move, shoot, move again. They go like 30 inches and there's 10 of them on 40 mils. Sure, you can move block these guys relatively easily. But if you block like the main brick and they're spread lengthwise, a lot of times they're going to be able to go one way or the other and sort of flow around you and then charge and slingshot their characters out from there. So the large units like that are very difficult to move block. The easiest ones to do are smaller units, right? Little vehicles and stuff. But a big unit of melee infantry is a little bit tough. So it's super tough. Once again, Gladius Task Force being the best task in the game, being certainly the most flexible for sure. It has a lot of really powerful effects that can work really well with these like styles of units, which is amazing. The other thing too to keep in mind is that you're gonna move block. If you move block them, right, you have to push up to the unit. They could reactive off the move block to try to escape it, to give themselves extra movement. And it means that you basically can't shoot them at all, right? It makes them immune to shooting because as soon as you shoot them, they engage the move block, kill it, and keep moving, right? And you've just given them a ton of additional movement because suddenly they're going to get the reactive move, tow your unit. The rest of the unit pushes past them because they can move around their engagement now. And then they're going to kill that, like pile in forward, kill them, and consolidate. So you give them like potentially 10 inches of movement if you ever rank a ranged attack targeting that unit at all. So you have to be very careful that you move block. If you're going to move block them, you're not going to move block them for value, right? It's not a situation where you're going to shoot them, move block them, they kill the screen, and you shoot them again and kill them because you can't shoot them the first time. So they have a lot of play against like sort of the classic solutions to this style of list. Which is pretty cool. So, yeah, that's a wild list. Absolutely crazy. I think the thing you have to, or the best way to do it is like have things that they don't easily kill on the charge because it is, or without the charge, because it is, there is the potential that they, for example, like they won't get lance when they're swinging at you off of a blood surge. So sometimes you can do things like you can run big beefy units out there. Like a Redeemer, right, is a great example. And he just like side swipes the unit. You shoot them and do a bunch of damage. They blood surge. They have to tag the Land Raider, and then the Land Raider just big guns and shoots them again and kills like half the squad immediately. So there's ways to like play around it, but obviously the Black Templar player knows that, and they're going to try to kill that thing or remove that threat with the repulsor executioners early in the game. But this is an insane build. Not a sword brethren in sight or an assault intercessor. It is all crusade boys all the time. The other thing too is that I guess the Emperor's Champion's probably just soloing it, right? Because we have 3 attachments here, and I guess he's just being a lone operative guy. So there's 2 lone operative characters in addition to the scouts to do utility stuff. Because the Emperor's Champion's actually a great lone operative, because he's higher than average movement characteristic, right? He's move 8, so he can. A lot of times there's a lot of things with an 8-inch movement that you can tow on turn 1 by deploying on the line that you can't necessarily do with a 6-inch movement. And so he actually gets really helpful early. You could also potentially put him like inside of the repulsor executioner and then disembark him and then move him. So you can go really far. which is cool, which is pretty cool. So I think one of the more creative and, dare I say, thematically appropriate lists for Black Templars we've seen in a really long time. I'm curious to see what it played against, actually. Going down the list, it beat Reaper's Wager, so it only lost semifinals, which is not, I guess Reaper's Wager could be tough. You do have some like pretty dangerous profiles against these guys, but the fight on death means that they just always get to punish you super hard. And if you're not able to like get value out of Scourges by picking away at the unit early, then it gets a little bit tough. Oh, there's also like Haywire Skyweaver's awkward. What are you gonna do with those, buddy? Not charge me, probably. It beat Biosanctic, Brood Surge, Genestealer cults. That's interesting. I guess it just overpowers the Aberrant squads, right? Like they are pretty resilient and they hit pretty hard, but there's only 15 of them and there's 60 Crusaders. The Repulsor Executioners, I guess, are pretty okay against the lighter infantry too, although they're not super useful in this matchup. All these Pure Strain Genestealers, I guess, get really tough because you might just get punched early, but maybe they went first and were able to take table space. Played against Tau. I'm interested. It's interesting because it seems like it beat Tau twice, right? Because it beat Tau in the final game, and it beat Tau in round 3. It played against Genestealer, who played Kauyon. And it does seem like a list that could potentially lose pretty hard to Tau because it has a lot of like profiles that Tau can really prey on. When you're shooting just mass numbers of multi-damage attacks, but the Blood Surge, like the reactive move plus Blood Surge, gives you so much presence. Plus the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor is actually super duper spicy in that matchup because Tau rely a lot of times on killing you off an objective to effectively contest it. And so if you're like, I'm going to toe this objective and Tau's like, I'll just shoot you off and then leave it be. But you've obsect it with like a lone operative, then there's really nothing they can do, and they can't neutralize the score early, which a lot of times is what Tau wants to do. They want to basically like burn your utility units down, and your scoring units, so that they just have like this overwhelming number of units in the late game, like round 5 or 6, especially Kauyon lists. Round 4 or 5. They have so much stuff left and they push forward. But if you're like putting pressure on them because your stuff's in the middle, you always have to make them play against Blood Surge, or play around Blood Surge, which is always really awkward. It makes it really tough for them to like do things like use piranhas effectively, because if the piranha like runs in to go do actions and stuff, you get shot and you just immediately Blood Surge and touch them, and then can't get shot by the rest of the army. So I can understand that being a tough matchup, and especially I guess if you're considering Tau being a tough, being something you're going to play against, but against regular Black Templars. This is another Gladius Task Force, Triple Castle and Double Marshal, Assault Intercessors, JPI, Scout Squads, Sword Brethren. The Sword Brethren feel very scary in that matchup, because they're like so many very high value 2 damage melee attacks that could just like clear through your units. But I guess they don't really get to use their repulsors in a great way, because you can't let yourself get tagged by them, because then you don't get lance, right? You can't wound them on 2s, and then you get punched first, which is really bad. Because all of those units are probably going to kill your stuff. Black Templars units are like really high value, but they don't have like, there's not many wounds here, right? It's 12 wounds plus 2 characters. So once you do 12 damage to them, the characters split and they're not very useful. But the units like the JPI in that matchup feel actually kind of like almost a detriment, right? Because they give you like potentially more things to Blood Surge into. And so your scoring is probably superior, but they just give the 20 mans like jumping off points to charge into, and they actually don't really, because they're only 1 damage and they don't have access to Oaths of Moment. So you're relying on accept any challenge no matter the odds to get damage through. They don't do that much damage back to a Crusade squad, right? They're gonna come in, do a couple of mortals, and then kill like a couple of intercessors, and then just die and give your opponent a consolidation move. It's interesting to see that the, I guess the Sword Brethren weren't enough there. Played against Forest Phantom, probably playing Space Wolves. There it is. Space Wolves in a Stormlance task force. I think the dangerous part there is that they don't have AP buff. You can AOC through a lot of stuff and then fight on death and uphold any, accept any challenge, and then you wound all their Thunderbolt Cavalry on force and put them on their invuln save. And that gets really spooky. So if they come in, you just like bonk them. The same thing goes for the Wolfguard Terminators. You have so many attacks. You have mortal wound generation from Helbrecht. You have AP bonuses like coming out your nose. And the Wolfguard Terminators don't get their -1 to be wounded because all your attacks are strength 4. You're strength 4 with +1 to wound. And even if you do get -1 to wound, so like Helbrecht coming in and hitting with his big sword, you can lance him to get around the -1 to wound. So the Wolfguard Terminators actually just like get swept. It's actually way easier to kill them than I think you'd expect in that particular matchup. Yeah. Plus, I don't know if the Thunderwolf Cavalry are like quite as big of a boon, I guess. If you can just like trade with them when they swing into you, and then they lance, you AOC, they do a bunch of damage, and then you just fight on death and like clip them, and then fall back and keep moving. It feels like it could be weird. I closed the window. Played against Matt Green, Headstrong, playing Warpbane Task Force. That's another one that I could consider being kind of awkward. Although, with so many units on the table, I guess it's probably tough for, well, I don't know. You have Cashling Crow. How does this army deal with Cashling Crow? He feels like a nightmare. I guess you like AOC through the Purifier shooting. Oh, it's melee Purifiers. I see. They're not Psy Cannon Purifiers. So the Purifiers can do crazy damage, right? To like mass. The big mass units, like the big massive units, because you're shooting like 20 anti-infantry 2+ ignore cover shots plus potentially 40 Stormbolter shots. With wound rerolls, probably with wound rerolls. This feels like this unit almost, well, I guess, what's the math, right? It should hit like, it's like 22 Purifying Flames, and then 2's rerolling is like, you give them like, you hand them like 21 saves. And they're base AP 1, right? Or AP 2. You almost always AOC that, probably, I imagine. They're AP 2. So you're saving on 4s if you take it on initiates. So you lose like 5 guys, and then they shoot all the Stormbolters. So it's like 3s rerolling on the Stormbolters with 44 shots. So they're getting like, what is that? I don't know, like 40 through probably, and then wounding 75% of the time if you're touching an objective. So they hand you like, they hand you like 28 saves. So you lose another like 6 guys or like 5 more guys. They kill like half of a brick in one go. And then you move and they overwatch you. That does feel like it would be difficult. I'm curious how that matchup went. Maybe the Purifier squad like got stuck in early, and like, because they also just hit super hard too. Like it's unlikely, I guess, they would get to like the full God activation where they get to hit one unit and then charge and kill another unit, right? And they can like 2 for 1. There's basically no way. I guess the problem is that they can't use the 6-inch strike to engage, to like finish off the stuff that they attack, because as soon as they 6-inch strike and shoot, they get engaged, right? And then they get hit first, and then they lose a bunch of Purifiers and they don't hit back quite as hard. And then once the Purifier squad's dead, like everything's kind of like little nickel and dime activations. So I guess the problem is that Hallowed Beacon, the stratagem to deep strike 6 inches, is really not very useful in this matchup. I think that's probably the case. The other thing too is that even when you are attacking, if your Assault Doctrine's active, even if you're attacking in your opponent's turn and you didn't charge, you don't get Lance, you can use Honor the Chapter to get +1 AP. The Lance doesn't come into play, but Honor the Chapter still works. It just requires that you target an Adeptus Astartes unit from your army, and it gives them +1 AP. So you can be forcing 4+ saves on all the Grey Knight infantry, which is really scary for them. It was hidden supplies and he picked fixed. Oh. Okay. I get it. I guess, like, that is wild because you don't have CP generation in Grey Knights, which is like basically as soon as you don't have command point. This is my opinion. In my humble opinion, chat. Here's a word to the wise from the maybe less wise. I don't know. If you don't have natural command point generation, fixed is off the table. It's just not allowed because being able to percolate in 2 to 3 command points over the course of the game, especially in a melee mirror where interrupt in heroic intervention is like so crazy powerful, you just never play fixed. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. A lot of times what you'll end up is like, oh, I can score more efficiently and I don't have to worry about my secondary draws, but also I don't have enough command points to actually kill my opponent to score the fixed secondaries. So that's been my experience basically every time I've ever either picked or had fixed picks against me. And listen, I play almost entirely mono greater demons. So I get picked against me a lot of times. And the win rate of people who pick fixed objectives against me is not very good because if they don't have command point generation, they don't have enough command points to kill me. And I imagine the same thing goes if you're playing 60 Crusaders. It's kind of the same thing in the opposite direction, right? Suddenly you can't fuel your counteroffensives and you can't fuel your heroic interventions. And you can't fuel your repelling spheres, right? You don't have enough CP for it. So I could understand that for sure. I could definitely understand that it's hidden supplies would be very, very bad for them too. But the other thing is as well is that the thing that I've noticed is that most armies have a certain number of units that you are expecting to have to utilize to get victory points, right? And in this case, it's like kind of the interceptor squads almost, right? Where you're like, oh, I'm going to push them and I'm going to like do some stuff and then move them around, whatever. As soon as you picked fixed objectives, those guys like lose purpose, right? They just become combat units, and they're okay combat units. They're not bad, but it's not like we're going to go toe to toe with 60 interceptor or 60 Crusaders with 10 interceptors and like get a lot of value out of that. Whereas if those guys are just scoring points, and it's like feels good. I don't know. Putting the crow brick where you need can be difficult. It takes a lot of space and it's your big hammer unit. Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. There's a lot of situations where only a couple of the purifiers get to shoot their guns because, like, in order to get your charge off, then you're trying to angle a different situation. I have to imagine though that in this matchup, the number one like consideration feels to me like it's like just holding crow until you can shoot with them. And then you create a situation. You just put them at like 8 or 9 inches from the Crusader squad. It's probably unlikely that 20 Crusaders can reliably hide from Crow's unit, right? And then you give them, you just hand them a situation where if at any point they blood surge, they go towards Crow and you charge them, right? And then they die. So they just don't have the opportunity to blood surge, and then you can just hammer them with all the big stuff and kill the unit. But you probably lose Crow in the crackback. He can maybe Overwatch for value. I guess not if you're playing fixed, maybe. And then you're running out from there. I guess it's a little bit tough. You're only killing 1 brick at that point. The Grandmasters are okay at killing them. They'll kill like 5 or 6 guys, but they won't kill a whole unit. And then, like, obviously, they're really bad in melee against that particular style of army. They're just like, you look at the Nemesis Grandmaster and you're like, oh my god, this Demon Hammer profile is amazing. And then you hit something where they don't get rerolls and you're like, well, it doesn't have a sweep. So it's attacking 5 times and it hits on 3s. Like, maybe it rerolls because of Hallowed Ground, but like, I probably miss one. I drop 1 to wound roll. Maybe they save 1 because they AOC'd or whatever. So I killed like 2 or 3 Space Marines, and then I just get fucking bodied. So they have to get all their work done in shooting, and they're really only shooting 8 shots. So I don't think they really have the volume to pull it out from there. So I guess I'm understanding it. I get it. On paper, it seems like actually like a pretty good matchup. But I guess like thinking through it, you probably kill 40 Crusaders, and the last 20 like blow you up. Green Hammer against anything but monsters and vehicles is super sad. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's awkward to see like the Nemesis Grandmaster get tagged by 3 Nurglings, and he's like, uh-oh. And they're like, you're -1 to hit me. And so he's like hits 3 times, he wounds twice, they save 1, he kills 1 Nurgling squad with this huge hammer. It's like, this sucks. Why won't you die? Please leave. Shouldn't you really only play fix if you bill your list to do it? I actually don't think. In my opinion, there are very, very specific builds that can reliably do positional secondaries. And it's incredibly matchup dependent. Because sometimes you hit that list that's like 20 infiltrators or like 10 infiltrators or whatever, and you're like, well, I can't deep strike anywhere. So this is stupid. What am I doing? So it requires an incredibly specific list build. And I think it's like Skyrunner or like Windrider Host and like some kind of demons maybe. And then like basically nothing else can do it reliably. So in 99% of like army compositions, just write off building for fixed, because in 80, like even if you have constructed lists where like, I can constantly up, down, 6-inch deep strike, pull my opponent forward to fight me, in most matchups, your opponent's going to be able to counter that in some way, and you would be better off keeping them guessing by playing tactical. So the other benefit of tactical objectives, the unspoken benefit, is that your opponent doesn't know what you're trying to do. As soon as you tell them, hey, I'm gonna behind enemy lines establish locus or whatever, I'm gonna engage in all fronts and definitely don't play storm hostile objective. That one's really easy to counterplay. But like I'm gonna engage in all fronts, like behind enemy lines or something. They're like, oh, so all I have to do to deny you like 30 points is just screen my home. So I guess I'll do that. And then they just really heavily screen their home. Whereas you notice with tactical secondaries, they're like, I could score myself 3 right now by moving my screening unit, or I could continue to screen, but I don't know if it's relevant for you to get in my deployment zone on your subsequent turn. And then like maybe you draw engage, or maybe you draw establish locus, and suddenly getting into the deployment zone is useful. So you've actually gained points in that trade, but they can't play around that. Whereas as soon as you give them the knowledge of what your secondaries are, they can immediately see what you're trying to do and immediately counterplay it. So in like 1% of like 1% of lists have the capacity to build for positional secondaries, and of those, like 50 to 60% of the time, you're better off taking tactical anyway. So it's like, unless you're like you're just laser focused on playing fixed secondaries, just don't even bother most of the time. If you're like a regular player who isn't like hyper fixated on one list that only plays fixed secondaries, just don't even bother with it. Unless you can basically do it. So like the outside of that one particular instance where you're in a matchup where you don't think your opponent can counterplay the secondaries, and you've built your army specifically to do them, which is like 1 in a million matchup. The only times I would play tacticals are if you don't have to change your game plan at all to complete the fixed, and you have a passive command point regen in your army, which is like you're playing against Valor Strike Lance with only character knights, and you have only anti-tank units in your army. Basically, it's like, if I'm just gonna hit you with my knights, like you see this happen all the time in Night Mirrors, where they're like, I'll take Bring It Down and Assassination. The other player's like, me too, because the only way we win is by fighting, and fighting, scoring us points means we don't have to do actions. So, of course, we're going to do that. And in basically every other situation, I would throw fixed secondaries out. I'm not going to say that they are never viable outside of like being able to score them on kills. But I will say that I think if you're not like a hyper focused player who's really in on one list, I would generally forget about them. Anyway, Windrider Host. Yeah, that's like one of the ones where you could do it. Tyranids and Biovores. And that's not even quite as good because the bio, like there's still counterplay there. Your opponent can still screen the Biovore mines. And so it's just like you have more deep strikers, basically. You get some situations where like your opponent physically can't screen their backline. Like Knights are a good example where they're like, in order to screen your backline, you have to give up 300 points worth of armigers that just never contribute to the game. And at that point, you're like, all right, I get it. But most armies will just like be able to sacrifice a utility unit or two and just screen out your entire capacity to engage with the secondaries, and then you just lose. So Celeste lost to the Space Wolves the second time around, and then won against Tau once again. This is Glynis here, who ended up 6-2, which is pretty respectable anyway. Callion with Pathfinders, Riptide Battlesuit, Skyray, Devilfish. And we blood surge into them to battle. Woo! Either you give me the objective with Obsec or I blood surge you. Your pick, Tau. That's cool. Well, Celeste, if you're still in the chat, congratulations on second place. That's huge out of 200 players and with a list that's cool and fun and awesome, which is neat. Fix is better in Prime Nexus when you can do actions in engagement if you had a pistol. Yeah, and you could also advance to do actions with assault weapons. There were a lot of situations. It was much easier to perform. There were also, I think, better fixed secondaries too, right? And tactical secondaries were worse because you couldn't new orders as often, so it was less consistent. There were some really weird ones like Storm Hostile Objective where like sometimes you just like physically couldn't do it, and so you just didn't get the points for it. I think the tactical deck being much more consistent nowadays like makes tacticals just better anyway. All right, let's hop over to James Thomas, who is playing Creations of Bile. It's been a while since we've seen Bile, which is actually kind of interesting. I remember this list got so much play when it dropped, and then like slowly petered out, and now no one plays it, even though it still feels like one of the most just pointedly beneficial melee detachments in the whole game. Because it's like 90% of the buffs are just like you're better at fighting now, and also it has like it has advance and charge, it has fight on death. I guess it doesn't have like an offensive bonus, which is probably the problem. Like you are running into just Chaos Space Marine like weird offensive profiles where everything's like strength 5 AP2 for some reason. It's kind of Chaos Space Marines do feel at some points like they fall prey to the early Codex syndrome where their offensive profiles just kind of suck. So I don't know. We'll see. So it's a Chaos Lord with Prime Test Subject, so that's the +1 damage characteristic and hit rerolls. So then he also gets wound rerolls if you put him in with Legionaries, which is sweet. We've got Cypher and we've got Fabulous Bill. You have to go. You can't just call him Fabulous Bile. You have to go all in and call him Fabulous Bill. I feel like if you're gonna rename your characters in your list, you have to commit to the bit. This is not far enough, James Thomas. We've got double cultist mobs. Oh no, legionaries. Okay, fair enough. I guess we're on cultist or chosen probably. We've got double chaos bikers. Incredibly strong utility units. Obviously, the benefit there too is that they also get. They don't get the benefits of the detachment ability actually. Huh. Okay, but they do. I think they still get an up down, right? So they're like kind of bad scouts. No, they don't. They just get +1 strength. Oh, interesting. I guess they're cheaper than Raptors, which is probably why we're playing them. Plus, they get a Power Fist and a bunch of heavy weapons. So I don't know. Chaos Biker's never bad. I was really high on Raptors in this detachment, and I'm curious that like basically no one ever played them. I guess they're just like too expensive. They're somehow more expensive than Jump Pack Assault Intercessors, despite being dramatically worse. But yeah, it's Space Marine privilege for you. We've got double chosen, so one for each of the characters, for Bile and for the little Chaos Lord. The big units for Bile, because obviously we want the the leadership ability to go longer, and then we can also damage blank for them a couple times, right? Because you can do it once per turn with Bile himself, and then you can eat an attack on the chaos on the Acolyte Surgeon too. We've got double obliterators, which is really fascinating. The obliterators I don't think really have any like synergy explicitly with the detachment. However, they are shooting, which is good, and they can give you a benefit if you roll +1 ballistic skill on your chart. You do get rerolls from Bile, but sometimes you just hit like the double 6 and you're like, this sucks. And you just have to eat +1 ballistic skill. It's not bad on the Chosen, because the Chosen do have like a bunch of these random combi weapons and stuff. So they do get work done, right? There's 3 plasma pistols, 4 combi weapons in the unit. So +1 ballistic skill on all the range weapons is okay, but it's great on the obliterators, right? So having an outlet for the particular situation where you accidentally roll +1 ballistic skill for infantry, is not too bad, and having shooting is never bad either. We then have 30 possessed, because those are kind of required for this detachment. They basically get super duper huge benefits from the all of the detachment abilities. The thing about possessed is like their profile. Let me pull up their datasheet actually. Their profile is really average. It's like above average. It's like slightly below average for most melee, like dedicated melee beatsticks. Oh, that's weird. Why doesn't it scroll? Oh, we're at the bottom. They're like, 4 attacks, 25 AP, 1, 2 damage. Like, that's fine. They're T6. So they're like high movement, high toughness. Everything else is kind of mediocre. But as soon as you bump any of those stats, they go sort of insane. So you could roll +2 movement, right? They go to move 11. Suddenly they have jetpacks. You could roll +1 attacks. It's a 20% damage increase. And then they also have a once per game devastating wounds. So more attacks to devastating wounds, more better. +1 toughness puts them to T7. So like a lot of like, sort of medium or heavy infantry sweepers actually doesn't work quite as well. You could also get like +1 weapon scale, so they get +1. So like basically everything but the +1 ballistic scale works incredibly well on possessed. And so, I mean, it's just natural that they get in there. So you could potentially go to move 11 and then get advance in charge. So these guys just actually like rocket across the table. It's been a while it's been a while for Bile, so it's pretty cool. The Ultramarine list up there, yeah, not for this event. This was pre-Victrix Honor Guard, so not many people were on the Ultramarines kick. I think at this stage, next week, I'm sure we'll start to see some Ultramarines get played with the new Victrix stuff. We have a couple of really boring ones, but then I want to talk about a cool one, chat. Let's talk about some sloppiness. No Hammer of Averni wins. No one's in on a Hammer of Averni. That's such a weird detachment, by the way. What a bizarre choice to make the Iron Hands detachment a like poor reflection of the Imperial Fists one. A detachment that already is not seeing play. Like, what? Why did we triplicate First Company Task Force? Why did we do that instead of just doing an Ironstorm Spearhead? It's like so weird. It's wild. Imagine if like Kanak Var did his like cool double O thing, but you were playing Ironstorm Spearhead and he got the Tech Marine ability to like get loan up when he's near vehicles in that detachment. Suddenly you're like, oh shit, we're playing like Ultramarines, but we saved 300 points on Gilliman. Like, this is cool, actually. But I think it speaks to the poor design ethos of Iron Hands the last 2 editions, where they're like, guys, it's the vehicle-focused detachment. That's why all of their special characters are heavy infantry buffers. And you're like, what? Not vehicle guys? Like, no. They only buff Terminators and shit. And you're like, why? Why won't we build them to do the thing that their sub-faction's supposed to do? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know. It's super bizarre. I think they strayed too close to the sun in 8th edition with Iron Father Furos, like actually just murdering the entire game for like 2 months. And we're like, never again. We're never again making him a hyper duper super tech marine. Yeah, it's wild. It's such a weird situation. All right, we are talking about Plague Legion today. Grab my notes. I don't know why that took me so long. So we're over here with Matt Zealous, old Zealous Matt. He feels very strongly about Nurgle Demons. He's playing Chaos Demons in Plague Legion. He was X11, so 6-1-1. He tied first round 75-75 apparently, which is pretty wild. And then only lost one other game. Pretty strong showing. And in a detachment that's probably underplayed. I will say I mostly don't play it because I think Be'lakor is cool. So that's most of the reason that I haven't played this detachment yet. But otherwise, I probably would be all over it. So it gives you can battle shock enemies or one enemy unit in each command phase within 9 inches of a friendly Nurgle demon, and counts everything within 9 inches of them as Shadow of Chaos. So you battle shock them at -1 and force them to take force them to take mortal wounds if they fail. In addition, so the important thing is that this is both players' command phases. So you're forcing 2 per round, which can both deal damage. So you could be doing 2d3 automatic mortals to anything that comes close to you. And it's in their command step. So it works like Shadow in the Warp, where you force them to take a battle shock test. They can't insane bravery it. They might fail, take damage, go below half strength, and then take another one in the battle shock step. If they fail that one, they take D3 more damage. So it's I think underrated how potentially powerful that ability is, right? Like 2 D3 mortal wounds, it's basically like an uber grenade that also battle shocks you and you lose strats and become OC0 and everything. In addition, they also have some other sort of effects with that. In this case, we're playing a Font of Spores, Greater and Clean One, which is +1 AP to all Nurgle demons within 6 inches of him. So he just becomes a huge. All the Greater and Clean Ones become AP3 on other attacks, which gets pretty nuts. Another one with Droning Shroud, which makes him like Be'lakor, gives him the 18-inch lone operative effect to everything within 6 inches, all the Nurgle demons near him. We have Double Poxbringer. That's I believe enhanced criticals on your Plague Bearer units. Plus, I'm gonna double check myself for that. I believe that's the case. I think they give you criticals on 5s. It is indeed criticals on 5s. Also, he forces -1 to battle shock checks of enemies within 6 inches, which is actually horrifying. So you're -2 on all those battle shock checks we just talked about if you're near one of these guys. And then we have Ronagus because he's amazing, and then a Sloppity Biopiper. Sloppity Biopiper then also forces battle shock check on everything within 6 inches at the start of each fight phase. So you could be forcing 1 battle shock check at the start of your turn, up to, I don't know, like potentially 3 battle shock checks from the Sloppy Biopiper, plus whatever battle shock checks you're taking normally for being below starting strength. Every single one of those could be -2 to the test. You take D3 mortals if you fail, or the Sloppy Biopiper has Canker Blight. So if you fail, he just kills a non-monster vehicle in the unit. So if you're like a character and you fail the battle shock check, you just die. Like, oh, look at me. I'm like a 6-wound Terminator captain. He's like, nope, get out of here. You could, it is like a casualty on the unit. So it's not that you can kill them like out of the, precision them out essentially. But if they are alone, their unit has been killed and you force a battle shock check on them, they could just die. It also works on like weirdly, there's a bunch of like mounted units that get hit by this. Awkwardly, other demons die to this because they have like Rend Masters, for example, are like mounted non-monster vehicle characters with 1 million wounds. And if they fail the battle shock check, they just explode. which is incredibly funny. You can have a sloppy Biopiper just rock up and instantly kill a 200-point character. No big deal. It's fine. Just get out of here. But realistically, it's on like heavy infantry units like Terminators. You can imagine like the Wolfguard bricks that we're talking about more recently. This guy being able to pull a casualty every time they fail one of those battle shock checks. You could be forcing like 3-4 battle shock checks per round. So once you get stuck in the mire with this army, they're just like, I don't know, take 1 million battle shock checks at -2. Each one of those kills a whole Terminator, right? Does basically max 3 mortal wounds. We then have the Changeling. The Changeling can also force additional battle shock checks when you shoot him. And then he's also just a lone operative, so that's super helpful. Triple Nurglings, which is nice. Triple Plague Bearers. 2 individual Beasts of Nurgle. A bunch of Fletch Hounds. Those guys just have natural up down, so they're good utility. 2 more Skull Cannons. Incredible. So the Skull Cannons also force battle shock checks as well. So it's after they shoot something, they choose it. It forces a battle shock check. So if they're just like shooting into the like the scrum, right? They can't shoot a melee, obviously. I don't want people to think that, but because they're a blast weapon. But you're in a fight and they're just pounding shots into you. Suddenly you're taking more battle shock checks. If they've run the Poxbringer up to you, you're -1 for Shadow of Chaos, -2 for the Proxbringer already, and then suddenly you're just like losing whole models out because of the sloppy Bilepiper. That's actually 6 synergy. I love that. So it's like Battle Shock the faction, but also you just have 3 great and clean ones in the middle of the table, right? So plus a million Plague Bearers. So you have a bunch of dudes who are all pretty annoying to kill. They're all high toughness characteristic and vuln saves, and feel no pains on the great and clean ones. And then, the longer you stay in the fight with them, the more they're going to punch you for a bunch of damage, but then also the more casualties you're taking from Battle Shock. And then they're also typically taking objectives from you and then obsecking them from the Plague Bearers. So that's pretty spooky. That's a pretty spooky one. I think that's all I had to talk about on the roster for California Cup here, chat. Very spicy set of lists from the X1s here. Horde Black Templars is sick. Creations of Bile is back, apparently, I guess. And then we also saw some hot Plague Legion. But that's not the only place that we saw God-specific Chaos Demons list. Because if we take a peek... Oh, yeah, Nurgle Man, chat. That's for you there, bud. That one, that goes out to Nurgle Matt. We also saw another Chaos Demons player over at the Me Showdown. So this is another very big event. This was not quite as large as the California Cup, 132 players. Was won by Aaron Hermstedt. I did talk about his list. He played Virulent Victoria Death Guard. I talked about him in the video yesterday. But we saw some really spicy results from that. Spectacle of Spite, Drukhari, which I feel like we've talked about basically every day since the World Championship. So I don't think we're going to go through that again. But we also saw Genestealer cults doing well. Adeptus Mechanicus doing well. Genestealer cults actually doing really well. I didn't notice that there were 2 of them. And then at the X and 2 slot here, 5 and 2, Taylor Barger, I guess, played Scintillating Legion Chaos Demons, which is extremely cool. So this is the Tzeentch detachment, where you get flux tokens. You can spend them to reroll a bunch of stuff. Advance roll, hit roll, wound roll, damage roll, or saving throw, or hazardous check. When you spend them, you give them to your opponent, and your opponent can spend them on everything but... they cannot reroll damage, and they can't reroll hazardous. And then when they spend it, they hand it back to you. The interesting thing is you do gain flux tokens if your opponent has any flux tokens. So the number of flux tokens in the pool that is trading back and forth can increase if your opponent doesn't spend them. So essentially, they don't have the opportunity to just hoard 100% of the flux tokens. What they can do is just burn through all of them immediately and then hand them back to you. You can spend them, obviously, but the more that either of you spend, the more consistent the game becomes, right? Because you just start getting better value attacks. The weird part about it, I don't know if I'm like super in favor of, super love the mechanic. I think generally speaking, the Scintillating Legion player can spend them to empower their stratagems. That's mostly where they're doing it. As the player without the flux tokens, because they can generate new ones when you have are holding on to them, you can mostly just burn through them to send them back. Although there are things that the Scintillating Legion player can do to force you to hold on to them so they can generate more. But there's not really a huge value to like holding on to them for a long time. So that said, let's talk about what we were playing. The weird thing about it is, as well, I do want to mention it too, is that you can only reroll as the Scintillating Legion player. You can only reroll 4 Tzeentch demons. As the opponent, you can reroll for whatever the fuck you want. Which and the downside is that Tzeentch demons, as a characteristic, tend to shoot many small, like mid-value attacks. Right? It's like 15 D3 damage shots from a Lord of Change. So it's not like, oh, I'm gonna like burn to reroll my damage on this like big Melta shot, because they don't have any of those. So it's weird because a lot of times like the Tzeentch player doesn't really get benefits from rerolls because they don't really have any attacks that they want to reroll particularly. But the other player can just be rocking a bunch of like las cannons and they're like, I'll reroll all my las cannons. It's fine. So depending on the matchup, you can have situations where the Scintillating Legion player actually basically their detached ability just gives their opponent a bunch of benefits. It's a really weird mechanic. I don't know if I'm super in favor of it, but it is what it is. Some people really like to play with it because it's like a fun little mini game. And there's a lot of like game theory to it, which I think is also really interesting. So in terms of game design, especially for a Tzeentch detachment, it's very cool. Whether it's actually competitively strong, I guess, is the other question. But we have a winged Demon Prince with Neverblade. So that's +1 strength, or excuse me, +2 strength, +1 AP, and +1 to hit. +1 attacks and AP, excuse me, and +1 to hit. So he goes from a base, I think he's strength 8, 6 attack, strength 8, AP 2, 3 damage. He goes to 7 attacks, strength 10, AP 3, 3 damage, which suddenly becomes significantly stronger. The winged Demon Prince, actually, off the top of my head, don't remember exactly what the one does from Chaos Demons, which I guess is a little bit embarrassing because I do play the faction. He gets sustained lethal, or excuse me, yeah, sustained lethal or precision when he attacks, and then he has a +3 attack once per game. Oh, so he can go to 10 attacks at 3 damage. That's actually, it's a lot. Okay, you know what? Fair enough. He hits like a truck. He's 10 attacks, strength 10, AP 3, 3 damage, sustained hits. Okay. And then you can burn, that's where you start to burn your flex tokens. You're like, I'll reroll all my ones with my flex tokens because we want more sustained hits. Let's go. I would prefer not to miss with my big beat stick demon guy. That's actually sick. We have a Flux Master with Inescapable Eye that gives you additional Flux tokens if your opponent is holding any. So additional incentive to burn through your Flux tokens. But again, they can just hand you Flux tokens at the end of your turn, which forces them to give you more to generate. We have a Lord of Change with Infernal Puppeteer, which is probably one of the best enhancements in the game. It's only 10 points, and it lets you shoot through the using the another model in a unit within 9 inches is the point of origin, which is a weird ability. Basically, you can string a unit back to the Lord of Change. We have one model within 9 inches of the Lord of Change, and then choose a model at the front of that unit to puppeteer to fire all your spells out of. So you can shoot 15 staff or a bolt and rod attacks out of a guy who's like potentially a unit of 10 pink horrors can string like probably like 18 inches. So you could shoot at someone with all your attacks who's like almost 40 inches away. Which is crazy, while you're out of line of sight. So you're like, I'm not touching that, which is crazy. It's one of the best enhancements, I think, in the game. And for certain, one of the best enhancements for Lords of Change, 100%. We have double pink horrors to do all that weird stuff with. Also, those guys, one of those guys running the Flex Master as well, to be a little bit tougher to kill. We've got triple burning chariots. That's another okay outlet for your rerolls because They do have like a 3 damage ignore cover ranged attack, which is kind of high impact. It's like the highest like base impact attack that you can basically get out of a ranged attack in Tzeentch, which is a little bit disappointing for the detachment that's supposed to be the gun detachment for the gun sub faction for Chaos Demons, but it is what it is. But they also strip cover, so they make the Lord of Change like significantly more powerful, because as soon as the Lord of Change can choose sustained hits on his gun, his power jumps significantly. But the math is generally that ignore cover is superior to sustained hits on his Bolt of Change, because he chooses one or the other, or lethal hits, which you'll never choose because it's not good. You'll basically choose between one or the other, and generally speaking, ignore cover is better. If by like marginally, the sustained hits is like a little bit, gives you more hits, but like 17% of the hits will be blocked by the cover save potentially, or the wounds will be blocked by the cover save. So the ignore cover is like slightly higher value, but if you just strip cover from the opponent anyway, you just use the sustained hits and he goes like full power. He goes kind of crazy, and then obviously there is a stratagem. It is Pyrogenesis. You can burn a flux token to get +3 strength and +1 AP. So he can go to strength 13 on the rod or on the bolt attack, AP 3 ignore cover. For D3 damage each, and sustain D3, so sometimes he just hits a trillion times. And if you do have flex tokens to burn, you can burn through the flex tokens, rerolling his ones to try to get more of those sustains, which is big. We have a flamer unit as well as a bunch of screamers just to hold down the midboard. I don't think there's like a ton of particular utility for the screamers themselves. There's no, it's not like a lot of stuff you can do with them. They're just kind of vibing. I guess you can up down them for a command point. But they're just there because they're a really good unit. 4+ invulnerable save and 3 wounds each, and an anti-monster vehicle attack is pretty solid. But yeah, that's a Scintillating Legion. The big thing is that they have a strat to up down out of melee. So the pink horrors being kind of tough to kill. The Flux Master gives them, I think, -1 to be hit permanently against all attacks. So the unit itself is so checks 1 from the hit roll, and then he's got a cute little devastating attack that he can auto flip 6s into, which is cute. So you can do some devastating wounds, and then once you're engaged, you're -1 to be hit. You're a 4+ invulnerable save. You can reanimate the units because you can split into additional models. So it's really, really difficult to one-shot this unit. You have to do basically like if you can't one-tap all 10 of them through -1 to hit and a 4+ invuln save, you basically have to do like 35 damage to actually kill them. And then if you don't kill them, they just up out of melee and then pop back in and do actions and stuff. So they're just like incredibly efficient at scoring. Which is where this list gets a lot of its victory points. The other thing too is that just generally speaking, Tzeentch demons tend to hold on a little longer than you expect because there's a lot of 4+ invuln saves. So things like the flamers and the 3-man screamers being 9 wounds with the 4+ invuln, it looks like a unit that you're just going to point like intercessors at and kill, but usually you're only going to kill like one of them, and then the other ones are just going to keep going and potentially up down and potentially do more actions and stuff. So they're kind of tough to remove in that way. It sounds like a fun casual detachment when your friend wants to help. There'll be tons of flex tokens to pull for both players. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Like there are, I think, really interesting games where both players are like throwing the flex tokens back and forth. As soon as you like start to like indulge in the mind game of it, I think that's where the interesting thing is for me, because it's like you start to value like whose rerolls are more effective and like who you think should have rerolls. Because there's definitely a play where you just give your opponent the 2 flex tokens every turn and then just hoard every flex token so they never reroll anything. They're like, you get to spend 2 flex tokens empowering your spells, and then you have no more flex tokens for the whole game, and that's the entirety of your detachment ability. Which is like, in fairness, not a great detached ability. But sometimes if you're like, hey man, all my attacks are like multi-damage devastating, I'm just going to flip through all my flex tokens, rerolling like railgun shots into you. And suddenly it's like, is this good for me? But a lot of times you're like, well, am I going to reroll like individual power fist attacks? Like, no, I'm not. I'm just going to hold the flex tokens and stop you from using them to buff your strats and stuff. It's interesting. I don't know. It's I like the design of the detachment. I don't know if I necessarily like the execution, but I think the design is very cool. That's the Chaos Demon stuff is really where In my opinion, they put so much effort in Grotsmas last year because it's all that stuff is from this time last year when they did the Grotsmas drops. And it's like the coolest design ever, right? All of they're all relatively playable. Like I'm not going to say that like Scintillating Legion is the best thing ever, but it's 5-2 at a GT or a major. It's fine and it scores highly, and the Puppet Master guy does like trillion damage if you like key off all his abilities. So it's definitely it has legs, and it's like from a top-down standpoint, meaning that like considering the lore first, it's like really, really cool and like good game design, right? Because like of what would Tzeentch do besides trying to basically like offering boons to your opponent that are actually sort of like poison pills, right? I give you a reroll, but your reroll is slightly worse than mine, which means that like I'm theoretically accruing additional value from it than you are. So like the more rerolls you get, the stronger I get, which is like on the whole of it very cool. I think if Demons had like a different Lord of Change loadout that had just like a big fucking sick gun, I actually think the detachment would be much stronger, because being able to consistently resolve stuff like that makes that tension really tough. But like, giving that guy like a 1 reroll of 1 is like, okay, cool, I guess. And then otherwise even if your opponent holds all their tokens, you can just fuel your baseline enhancements. Which is all you're doing basically is just like making your strats do the normal thing that they're supposed to do. Talk about some Genestealer call for a moment here, chat. We'll hang on over to the third place player at Show Me Showdown, Ryan Verbeck, who's running Final Day Genestealer cult. So this is the detachment where you get to take Tyranids and also Genestealer cultists together in one army, and they buff each other. The Genestealer cults get +1 to hit while they shoot something that's near a Tyranid. And the Tyranids get to eat the Genestealer cults to regenerate wounds, which is neat. I always forget what the Tyranid half of the mechanic is. It is at the end of your movement phase, Tyranid synapse units from your army can select a Genestealer cult unit, excluding pure strength Genestealers, and one friendly unit, each within 9, visible to the synapse unit. You then feed D3 1+1 mortals from the Genestealer cult unit into the Tyranid unit, and it regains that many lost wounds. And then if you do that, the Tyranid unit gets +1 to hit. Okay, so you can eat mortal wounds off of your Genestealer cults to buff the Tyranid models and regenerate them. Is essentially the thing. And it's end of movement phase, so you get a lot of control over it, because you can move all your stuff together and then start picking them for mortals, which is cool. But then otherwise, the Genestealer cults get +1 to hit while they shoot something near a Tyranid, which is great. So we have a Benefictus with Inhuman Integration. That's sustained hits in addition to +1 to hit when you shoot something near a Tyranid. A Biophagus with Enraptured Animation. That's you can't Overwatch me, bro. No Overwatch. Nuh-uh. Double Reductus Saboteur. Auto Pistol Acolyte Hybrid unit for CP generation, plus a Neophyte Hybrid unit. Big unit of Neophyte Hybrids. That's for the Benefictus to go into. So they get lethal and sustain and +1 to hit. There's also a +1 to wound strat if they kill a Tyranid character. Yeah. That you can get a nice benefit from. We've got a Goliath truck, double Achilles Ridge Runners, 2 units of 1 with mortars and, 1 with a mortar, 1 with a survey auger, so we can strip cover from something to then key up the either the Neophyte Hybrid brick, because we're not in Ascension Day. We don't have the ignore cover as the baseline when we arrive from reserve. You have to source that from something. So you'd use the survey auger to buff that unit. And then you could also theoretically buff the other Achilles Ridge Runner unit. That one's running spotters and mining lasers. The benefit there obviously is that the spotters improve your ballistic skill. The detachment ability gives you +1 to hit. You're now hitting on 2s with the mining laser shots, which is very high efficiency. We have a big hybrid metamorph unit. That's for the Biophagus to go into, so they can run into people without Overwatch and then hang out. And then a couple more smaller hybrid metamorph units as well. There are charge bonuses for these guys. And there are wound rerolls for the hybrid metamorphs on top of that. You can target a Genestealer cult unit, get reroll wounds of 1, but full wound rerolls if a Tyranid is within 6 inches. So the Metamorphs can actually trade up really hard. Because they can already swing with the 2 damage profile. And then that's like kind of mid-strength. I think it's strength 5 AP1. But then you're potentially crossfiring it for AP2 and full wound rerolling, so you can swing into big stuff and do some serious damage. The +1 to hit also will affect them as well at that point. So then you're hitting on 2s, full wound rerolling. Yeah, which is neat. We have Death Leaper for Tyranids. That's a good outlet for the +1 to wound strat. If you just run Death Leaper into something scary and then they kill her, and she's like, haha, joke's on you, idiot. The other thing too is hyper adapted Raveners are super good there as well because they're a deep strike threat, so you can ingress them and then run in and just beat up a tank. Your opponent kills them because they're really easy to kill. They're just 4+ 4+ armor save. And then you're like +1 to wound on that guy, and then your army just kills them. Double lictors as well for some early game drops, plus a bunch of gargoyles to turn on all of the +1 to hits. So the gargoyles are super fast. They can either advance because they have assault weapons, shoot, move 6 inches. So they go 18 plus D6 to then apply the buffs to people. So they're a very good disruption unit because essentially like within 19 plus inches, they can always get OC onto an objective automatically. As long as your opponent isn't physically body blocking out the objective with their engagement range. And then they can also then spread, clear the objective, and either score an objective or move block enemies, and you can shoot them for another turn with the mining lasers. So you can create these like weird situations where your opponent gets just like jailed by gargoyles, and you just get to like full run of the table to do whatever you want. So you're just like surrounding the table with like metamorph units and these little utility squads. There's lictors on all the objectives. You can potentially move block your opponent from getting within 12 inches of the lictor to attack them. So they're just going to hold down objectives and do actions and things. And then you shoot them multiple times. You open up yourself like space to rapid ingress. And it's just really a nightmare to deal with the gargoyles in that position. And then if you don't kill them, they can also regenerate themselves. So so you can get the gargoyles back and then they can start doing it again, which is sweet. And then that's not even the only Genestealer cults that we saw doing well at this event. Apparently, John Indelicate, old rough John over here, who's playing Biosanctic Brood Surge. Big Genestealer cult energy from Me Showdown. That's actually wild. So this is the Biophagus attachment. I'm going to refresh myself on this one. It's been a while. So this one, you get +1 to charge rolls for Aberrants, Biophagus, and Pure Strength Genestealers. You also get +1 attack when they charge. We are playing an Abominant with Predatory Instincts. So that is, you infiltrate and heroically intervene for free. It used to be in the OG detachment, the index attachment. I guess they moved that over. Double unupgraded Abominant, 1 Biophagus, 1 Acolyte Icon Ward, plus a Patriarch with Biomorph Adaptation. That's an additional armor penetration and damage characteristic. So he goes to AP 3 damage, I believe. Plus a Reductus Saboteur and a Sanctus with a sniper rifle. That's curious. I wonder what the Sanctus is doing. Is he just like a lone operative guy in this particular list? The Sanctus is a cool unit because they get different abilities based on their weapon loadout, and I kind of wish they did that more often. I like a data sheet that can do multiple things, right? I already like characters that can like join a unit and do something, and then alternatively be by themselves. In this case, he gets a 6-inch reactive move. So he's just a combi weapon lieutenant. If he has the sniper rifle active, which he does. And then at the start of the first battle round, he gets full hit and wound rerolls against something. He's shooting a strength 7 AP2 3 damage precision weapon with full hit and wound rerolls against one particular thing. So he's actually like a little bit of damage. It's actually kind of spicy. Plus a reactive move guy. It's not too bad. I don't think he has any particular synergies with the detachment. Nope. In fact, he's just vibing. Oh, no, just kidding. you can use your characters to explode on people for mortal wounds after your opponent kills them. So if they get him in melee, he can do D3 back to them, which is cute. It's actually kind of fun. So you can have a bunch of these little like infiltrating characters running around, I guess, and your opponent kills them, and you're just like, haha, take damage. Because we also have a Reductus Saboteur. The Reductus Saboteur could actually like punish you super hard, right? Because she's going to do a bunch of mortal wounds from triggered explosives as you're coming in to attack, and then once you engage her and she dies, you just ping him for another T3 mortals. That's actually sick. I didn't realize that. That's cool. There's an Acolyte Hybrid auto pistol unit for to generate some cannon points. A Neophyte Hybrid unit, big unit of 20. Goliath trucks. Big unit of Aberrants, probably for the infiltrate, plus 2 more units of 5 just for the just to sort of deep strike in. 2 Achilles Ridge Runners with Survey Augers for what's the word for Crossfire, and then a big hybrid Metamorph team that's for the Biophagus to jump into. They don't naturally get the bonuses. It's only Biophagus and Genestealer units, so you do need the Biophagus to get the basically any synergy from the detachment on those guys. Plus 15 Piercing Genestealers, a unit of 10 for the Patriarch to join, and then a unit of 5 by itself. And then the big thing here is that we can charge bonus these guys. So you can get up to +3 to your charge bonus based on the number of units that you select as the charge target. So all of these melee units, the Abominants and the Genestealers and the Metamorphs, are going to get a natural +1 to charge. So coming out of Deep Strike, they hit on an 8. There's a strat where if you target the closest eligible, which you're going to do if you're coming out of Deep Strike, you can get an additional +1 to charge. So you can hit on a 7 with a CP reroll for floating. It's about a coin flip chance, right? 56%, I think. And then if you select any additional targets beyond the first, you get additional bonuses to charge up to +3. So if your opponent leaves a bunch of stuff near each other, you can hop up a big unit of Abominants or the Metamorphs or something, and then you can get potentially up to +4 to charge with them. So you're making a 9-inch charge out of Deep Strike on a 5. Unlikely you're going to, get that particular, God situation out. But it means that you can make very consistent charges out of Deep Strike. So you can constantly keep your opponent off balance on their objectives, right? You can constantly just be bouncing them off by getting these huge, getting these big, sort of units stuck in. And then we can, from behind that, we have the huge Neophyte Hybrid unit that we can hop in and then start obsecking objectives in the back line there. I think the only attachment for them that we have is the Icon Ward. I don't know if he's doing anything special with them. No. So I think they're just a big unit of guys that are coming and hopping around. And you being a big annoying OBSEC unit that's hard to deal with. So that's really cool, chat. It's nice to see. I guess we saw a lot of final days going down at WCW. We talked about how final day was basically like the new metagame for Genestealer cults now that people are moving away from Ascension Day. But it seems like there's a little bit of push for Biosanctic Brood Surge because we also talked about that going down in some other events as well. So congratulations to all the Genestealer cult players ripping it up over at Me Showdown. Anyway, chat. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this shindig up? There was there's a couple of Necron lists. I don't know if they're particularly spicy. That did okay. One of them doesn't list their detachment, so that's great. We can figure it out from the enhancements, but maybe you should put that in your list. There is some Drukhari. It's Spectacle of Smite, and honestly, because we talked about Spectacle of Smite literally every day, I think that we're gonna. If you want to listen to me talk about Drukhari for a really long time, you can watch the stream from yesterday. We have a whole discussion about Drukhari, how they won an event, and I also talked about them in my video yesterday as well because they won 2 GTs this weekend. So all my videos from yesterday, we talked about Drukhari for like a combined like 40 minutes probably. So you can see those ones. Any Thousand Suns or Astra Militarum? Let's take a peek for Thousand Suns. I'm curious about that. There's an X2 Thousand Suns. Oh, Nico Aurea. Nico's playing a Warpforged Cabal, which makes total sense because that's what he used to play back in the day. If you know, you know. Because he pioneered like a really interesting version of like vehicle Thousand Suns that like before it was cool. Where instead of taking like mass rubric and sorcerers, you took like a billion, like a bunch of vehicles and you debuffed people with Magnus and then shot them with vehicles. And it was like kind of innovative and cool. And I thought that list was neat. And it looks like he's doing the same thing. He's playing Warpforged Cabal. So that's the vehicle detachment where you get like basically Ironstorm Spearhead bonuses, but extra benefits if you have sorcerers near you, and even more, and you explode better if there's sorcerers near you because you like siphon power into them. It's another very cool like top-down game design sort of ability. We've got triple Zangor Shamans. Love it. I love it. 60 points for Zangor Shaman. I am sad that they got a little points increase, but it was crazy because they were 50 points on release, I think, and they were like crazy efficient. You could just run a million of them around and they just do all your utility stuff. You always took Great Bow guys because they were like even more efficient somehow, but the Zangor Shamans were like kind of underrated at that point. One of them has Perplexing Cloak, so he gets lone operative when he's near a vehicle. They all trigger the vehicle synergies, so they can all like empower the vehicles for extra damage, extra rerolls. Reroll a hit roll, wound roll, and a damage roll every time they activate. So just a old school like expert crafters vibe from like 8th and 9th edition. We've Ahriman for the redeploys. I imagine we're playing Sekhetar robots probably for that guy. Plus another Zangor Shaman with Warp Siphon. That lets you eat vehicles for a mortal wound to re-roll your casting dice when you channel the warp. So you have a little bit more reliability on your channels, which is good because like the ability is really tough to get off right now. We've got a single Rubric Marine squad. The nice thing there is that the Aspiring Sorcerer in that unit also is like a Psyker keyword. So he turns on all the abilities too. It doesn't have to be a character. And then if we're playing Predators, which it looks like we are, the Predators key off of having Sorcerers shoot at something. And that can be either the characters, so we can do it with like Ahriman or the Shamans, or we can just shoot them with the little curse from the Aspiring Sorcerer to make sure that they trigger the Predator abilities. So then it's 1, 2, 3 Predator Destructors. We have 2 with las cannons. One of them's taking Inferno Combi Bolters, or Inferno Heavy Bolters, excuse me, which is interesting. I guess their heavy bolters are AP2 instead of AP1, which is neat. So you're a little bit better infantry sweeping, and you're not quite as worried about getting hosed by cover like you are with a regular heavy bolter. You have a Chaos Spawn unit for utility, 1 Vindicator for some mid-board punch, Forge Fiend for some long-range shooting, 1 Mutalith Vortex Beast. The funny thing about these guys is that, like, they fit the way the army plays really well, because they want, like, you really want, like, a big, spicy thing that you can rock up in the middle of the table. And the Vortex Beasts are good at that, but they aren't vehicles, so they don't get any of the bonuses. You don't get the rerolls, you don't get the siphons off of them. They like none of the strats work. It's kind of interesting because you almost always play Vortex Beasts. They're also good because you can empower the ritual, so you can get the +1 to cast when you roll the 3rd dice to make sure your rituals go off. But it's funny that they like feel like they should benefit from the detachment, but they super don't. We do have 12 Sekhetar robots. That's fucking wild. And then a bunch of utilities, Zangor unit, plus an enlightened unit. So 12 Sekhetar robots. So Ahriman, right, can redeploy these guys before the game begins. So select up to 3,000 Suns unit from your army and redeploy them. When doing so, you can set them in strategic reserve if you want. Plus, he gets +1 to cast rituals. So he is pretty good at ritualing. And then we can redeploy 12 Sekhetar robots, so we can cross the midboard with them, make sure your opponent can't deploy, and then put them in a safer spot after the before the roll-off happens. The Sekhetar robots are interesting. We do have an Armor of Contempt effect for them because they are vehicles. So you can keep them alive a little bit longer. You can fall back, shoot, and charge with them. Which is actually, that's very good. Because they can like Overwatch and heroically intervene. So you can, for free. So you can kind of bounce them around in combat if your opponent pushes up into you. And then just fall back and keep going. You can access +1 to wound with them. And there's also a strat to reverse tank shock your opponent when they charge you and make them take battle shock checks, which is actually cool. That's cute. So these guys can like really dominate the middle of the table. They get all the benefits of the detachment, so they get rerolls both in shooting and in melee. So they have missile racks, and melta-guns they can use the rerolls on, and then they can also punch in melee to get the rerolls as well. I don't believe that the Sekhetar deadly demise, right? They don't. So they actually don't get the downside of the detachment ability at all, where they blow up more easily, so they could kill your characters. They just vibe. They're just vehicle guys. And you can use every strat in the detachment on them. That's fascinating. What a fascinating build. Plus, they shoot okay if you start to get all the abilities active, right? You get like reroll hits, and suddenly a unit of 12 is shooting 8 strength 10 Hellfire missile shots. You can access like +1 to wound on them as well when you do that, and they reroll their hits. So they could be wounding like other vehicles on 3s or 4s, and then rerolling hits, and then shooting a bunch of melta-guns. I don't know. I guess I get it. It's a lot of investment. 160 points, you only get 4 models out of it, which are basically just like kind of like bargain bin Centurions. But the amount of like board control you get by just being able to place 12 of them in the middle of the table and then redeploy them is a lot. That list is cool as fuck. That's actually super sick. I'm glad you asked about that, chat, because I would never have looked at the competitive high like mass Sekhetar robot build. That's actually really cool. Are bow goats good anymore? They're fine. Bow goats are good because like, these are actually spear goats. But bow goats are like, their base profile is actually like just okay, right? It's like, you know, you're shooting like an ignore cover lethal hit gunshot like every turn. It's not, you know, the weird thing about the bow enlightened was that previously they could act as like your like functional damage dealers, and that wasn't really ever supposed to be their role. And I think that was like where people were like, you know, oh, I'm not getting like a lot of damage out of my unit that I'm expecting a ton of damage out of, but the unit you were expecting to get damage out of was like a 100-point utility unit. That's like a Space Marine player complaining that their infiltrators aren't killing their opponent. You know what I mean? And I think that like their attacks are just fine. And people will play them when they have the points for them, but I don't think it's rare that you see armies take like the big bricks of 6 anymore, unless they're trying to do weird stuff with the disc sorcerers and like Incandium or something. There was an ask about Astra Militarum. There was an X1 Astra Militarum at Me Showdown. It's combined arms. It's kind of normal combined arms stuff. It looks like, anyway. Gaunt's Ghosts, the Command Squad, Cadian Shock Troopers, 1 unit of 3 Ogren, just a high attack volume unit with a bunch of shooting. Pew, pew, pew. 2 units of Adelan Rough Riders, 60 points each. Oh, excuse me. 2 units of Adelan Rough Riders, I guess just the 3s. Or the 5s, excuse me. And then a unit of 5 Death Riders, 1 Hellhound, 2 Vanquishers, 2 Rogaldorans, 1 Scout Sentinel. Cadian Command Squad, Cadian Shock Troops, Ogren Squad. Okay. So I guess the Ogrens are just going in the Chimera. We don't have anything else to put in them, it looks like. Oh, there's Lord Solar in this list. Oh, that's cool. And we do have like the full wombo, where Solar can go into the unit with the command squad, so we can get all of his orders Vox casted out to all the vehicles. So you're only running 1 Rogaldorn commander. It does have Grand Strategist, but we still have all of Lord Solar's like universal orders. available to all the vehicles. So we can still pump all 5, or I guess 5 out of the 6 tanks full of orders every turn. So neat. A little light on the forward operation, but I guess it's just like relying entirely on cavalry to do all of its stuff, right? The Ogryn squad's a great trading piece because it's like basically going to kill like 5 to 10 dudes when it goes in, because they shoot so many times. And then they also melee well, right? Against light stuff. Like they don't want to go into 3+ armor saves, but they shoot 18 times and then they charge and swing another 12. So they attack 30 times for 60 points. So like going into another 10 guardsmen, you'll just pick up 10 guardsmen with the Ogryn squad. So they're like a good trading piece in that way. And then you can throw them out because they're only 60 points. Who cares? You get a Chimera out of the deal too, which is just like a tough midboard vehicle. And then you can use the Rough Riders with move to do all your actions and then regenerate them when they die. And then you're basically like the whole time you're just like waiting to shoot people with tanks. Seems good. Seems kind of more tank heavy than I expect typically, because a lot of times a lot of these lists are on mass like forward operators, so like mass Ratlings and Khazarkin, but the tank builds is definitely still good. Any Tyranid lists with Harpies? No. The real question is, are there any Tyranid lists at all? I think we are 14th place at California Cup was Tyranids. It's Invasion Fleet, chat. Boring. It's Hyper Adapted, Neurotyrant, Swarm Lord. There's a bunch of Termagants. We're doing a little Sand Pope thing. A bunch of Genestealers. Yeah, it's like mostly a Sand Pope kind of build. Triple Exocrines to shoot. Double Genestealers. Neurolictor and Venom Throps to keep the Termagants alive. We're relying entirely on Endless Swarm to regen the Termagants. We don't have the Termagant in the list, so we're not all in on the Termagant build. But obviously that gives you more command points to play with. Although it's interesting that we picked, I guess Swarmlord's pretty good in that situation because you usually have to come in and fight the Termagants to kill them, right? Reliably. Especially if you like force your opponent to commit into 2 units, right? You octopus 2 units out to the midboard objective, and they suddenly have, it's a minimum of 2 activations to clear them. And then they have to clear both of them to the point where they can't just regenerate back to the objective. So that gets kind of tough. So a lot of times you have to come in and charge with your like faster, your like aggro stuff, and then Swarmlord can fuck up your command point generation or your command point economy there when that happens. So that is the benefit that if he has over a Hive Tyrant. But the Hive Tyrant is actually typically more, like you play with more command points on average if you play the regular Hive Tyrant, because you also can discard tactical secondaries to him as well. Not that Tyranids really discard that many tactical secondaries. To be fair, Tyranids do score a lot. So in fairness, I guess they are going to be relatively consistently burning through their objective deck. Oh, it is playing Flesh Borers too, Chad. That is true. Instead of the pistols. Honestly, I don't even know how often. If you're not running, there's no lethal hit outlet here besides the detachment ability. So I don't even know how often we care that much about their shooting. It's probably relevant, but it might just be a modeling thing. Because like I know I own like 200 Termagants and they're all Flesh Borers. Because in the past, like the other weapon options were just dog shit. And there's also a bunch of Termagants that got released in 4th edition that were monopose, and you could only assemble that with Flesh Borers. And that's like probably a third of my Termagants are like that. But I own a fucking million Termagants. I also own a bunch of Devourer Termagants for all the times they used to be really good. And unfortunately, those days are over. But I did like funny Termagant Wombo combos. There was an old build in early 9th edition where you could give them full rerolls in like the equivalent of lethal hits and a bunch of hit bonuses. And they averaged like 70 saves on like most targets. It was fucking wild because they were base 3 shots and you could take a beat to 20. So you're shooting 60 times with like sustained lethal and like hit and wound rerolls or something crazy. I can't remember the whole combo anymore. And they would just like, come out of strat reserve and just like fucking vaporize the tank, and your opponent's like, what just happened? You're like, I don't know, it's Termagants, man. But they were a little weird because they were kind of hard to get on target a lot of times because like trying to get 20 guys with line of sight to something's really awkward. And so I didn't end, like their potential damage is really high, but they didn't actually end up averaging that amount of damage. But if I had to guess, it's just a unit that's assembled with flesh boars, and that's what he played him as. I don't know if like the Spine Fist build is like, I don't know, gonna, you know, whether or not you have Spine Fist is gonna totally turn the whole army on its head. Anyway, that's what I have to say about that, chat. Also, I don't know, there's strength 5, 18-inch range. So like you do, plus assault. So you do actually get a lot of work out of them. Like you will chip wounds off of utility stuff just by running the Termagants around. Yeah. Anyway, chat, that's our super major results for the week. I think some really interesting stuff that we had going on this week. I like all the Genestealer cult innovation we've been seeing. All of these demon lists have got me going. We got some, I mean, it's been crazy, right? Like the metagame's so fucking fluid right now. We have like Horde Black Templar, Chaos Space Marines. You know, there's normal Eldar stuff, but like Space Wolves are like low-key kind of killing it. There's all these weird demon lists running around. And it feels like every army, I'm not even really cherry picking here. Most armies are like really kind of innovating quite a bit, which is pretty interesting to see. There is some stagnation in like Adeptus Mechanicus is like you basically play the same list and you swap between Haloscreed, Battleclade, and Skitarii Hunter cohort. Eldari is basically a mono faction at this point. And Drukhari, it seems like everyone's just on the Steve Trimble list. But to be fair, I don't know what else Drukhari has to do. And I think the Codex is still new, so we might see some innovation later. But it feels like most of the other factions are like really sort of digging pretty deep, which is cool. Pretty cool, chance. All right, folks. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I'll see y'all tomorrow for Warhamster Wednesday. I'm about to go boot up my little computer and see how things go. I recorded a really long video yesterday. I don't know if I'll have time to edit it this week. I have 2 big videos that are just sitting on my hard drive right now that are fully recorded, and I just haven't had time to edit them. And I'm like, it's like burning me. It's like getting me itchy a little bit. I'm like, it feels weird. I haven't released a video. But I have like so much content on my backlog basically that I'm like ready to ship out. I'll probably be doing a couple more getting started videos later this week. I want to sort of like record a backlog of them for when I'm out of town, and I'll send those to my editor later on. So looking forward to that. I also looks like I'm going to have a pod finals over on Twitch tomorrow evening. I'm going to be live. I'm playing Imperial Fists. We made it to the finals of the Imperial Fists, which is sweet. So let's go. Will I have getting started videos that are not Space Marines? Probably not. I might do Adeptus Mechanicus, actually. But the Space Marine stuff, I mean, obviously Space Marines are like the big release right now. But the other thing, too, is that a lot of my Space Marine videos from the start of that series are now out of date because the faction's been like totally redesigned. So I have to redo them because otherwise, like, people will be like, I watched your video and a bunch of the rules you said were wrong with what gives. So I have to cover that. So I am a little contractually obligated to do like at least Salamanders and Ultramarines. So I apologize, chat. I'm sorry. It's I don't know. It's what it is. But I probably want to do Adeptus Mechanicus at some point in the not-too-distant future. What do you video about the grenades present on the models? I don't know. Probably not. I don't want to get like too negative. I feel like a little bit, especially last week, because we talked about the Space Marine stuff for so fucking long. And a lot of people were like, oh, this channel sucks. Like all you do is complain about 40K. But like legitimately, I don't want to do that. So I don't want to do like a bunch of negative videos where I crash out. I don't think that's like very, I don't know. I don't think it's very constructive. So I don't know. We'll like joke about it on live stream, but like, I do want to like do more positive content more often. So anyway, folks, that's going to be it today. Keep it classy, folks. If happy wargaming, I'll see you tomorrow on the live stream. So cheers.